Hey everybody, welcome to Online Growth Systems, and in today's episode, we are going to be going over the 24 cognitive biases by Charlie Munger, specifically cognitive bias number 4. Error causing psychological tendency, that's a mouthful, also known as the self-confirmation tendency. Alright guys, well let's dive right into it. Adjust the mic a little bit here. So when you're looking at the 4th cognitive biases out of the 24 cognitive biases, first of all, number 1, if you haven't seen the other 3, you gotta watch them. The more that we're diving into this, the more that they're correlating with each other. So you can click the link somewhere around here. I'm sure a little bloopy will pop up in this corner here, but so the 4th cognitive bias, it's something called the self-confirmation tendency, and that's just kind of a more specific version, but the big mouthful, you heard me say it in the beginning. So here we go. So it's pretty much saying that the more that you express your opinion about a certain topic, the harder it is to change your mind. That's kind of the more specific version that we're talking about. The broader sense of the bias is talking about how it's hard to change someone's minds from the very first thing that they've heard. So he uses the comparison of like Newton's laws of physics or any natural discovery within science itself. He uses the example of a scientist called Max Planck. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Dr. Max discovered some stuff with modern physics. And when he was trying to convince his colleagues and his crowd of intellectual followers about his new discoveries, that he had numerous examples of facts, and literally he disproved the previous known facts about that physical that law in physics, and he had a really hard time convincing his colleagues and the fellow intellectuals why he was right, even though he had numerous evidence, and to this day we take that discovery as fact. So where he had the ease is convincing the younger generation that hadn't been pounded into their brain what the old facts were. A great example of this bias being applied in our history is when Christopher Columbus, when he thought the world was not flat, that it was round, and he was willing to take that chance by sailing across the sea to Central America. Lots of people didn't believe him, even though he could prove, like, well, when you see a ship going in the distance, it gets shorter, right? It gets smaller. Why do you think that is? You know what I mean? Because it's going around the curve, so you start to see less and less of it. That's kind of the example that they used back then, and people still didn't believe him. He would go bring back furs that from exotic animals from the two Americas that don't exist in Europe, Africa, Asia, right? Australia too, and people still didn't believe. But as the generations went on and on, a couple generations later, it's just known fact now. So make sure that you are not a victim of this 4th cognitive bias. You do not want to be known to have the error-causing psychological tendency, because Charlie Munger actually talks about this as being one of the superpower biases out of the 24, because he said this one has the biggest impact in people's lives, whether it's physics, laws of physics, whether it's your religion, if the world is flat, whether it's the laws of money, if you just think that the 9 to 5 is still the way to go, you know what I mean? You have to look at more entrepreneurial routes. You know what I mean? And of course, that's not for everyone, but you make sure that you're not locking your mind and thinking that the first thing that you were taught by, professors at school, by your older brother, by your mom, by your neighbor, you know what I mean? Whatever things that you were imprinted as a young person, that you're not holding those biases to be fact just because those are the ones that you grew up taking as fact. So he uses the example of college students going on strike and how people, or, protesting, and how they're verbally affirming their own beliefs. He said every time you do that, it's drilling it further and further into your psyche, the psychological bias, right? And he said it's harder to change that person's mind even when they are presented the facts, even if it's for their own good to change, right? So thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure that you smack that subscribe. But actually, you know what? Don't smack it, because you've been smacking it for like the last 3 videos. For this one, just like, just gently, just go like this. Go. Just blow on it a little bit so it just goes, and it just subscribes you. Just blow on it a little bit so it just goes, and it just subscribes you. Alright, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in Cognitive Bias number 5. Thanks.